Okay, so what we are doing today is a sort of experiment, in a sense. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Eva, and today we are doing a revival show. With these, what I mean that I wanted to kind of discuss with you, or in this case present to you would be better said, some books that I didn't feature, I believe, before in the majority of my videos, if not at all on my channel, and I might have mentioned them but I never got in any details about the plot or anything. So these are books that I loved in the past or really enjoyed. Not necessarily they make it into my favorite of all times, or my top books of the year, probably because some of these books I've not read while I was already on YouTube, booktube in this case, so they might have made it into the best of the year if I was doing booktube at the time, but they didn't because I wasn't. Or maybe at books that I've mentioned once on my channel and never again, and I think they do deserve a mention again. And I chose 10 for this video. I might do another video in the future, or I might eventually do a category video. So for example, going for genre, my favorite true crime, my favorite crime, my favorite horror, and so on. I believe I've done the horror once, but I need to double check. These are just 10 books that I enjoyed personally. I do read a bit of every genre, so there's gonna be a mix of genre in these, and I would suggest them to you if you want to give it a try. Maybe they're in a genre that you want to explore, or you've never explored before but you'd be interested. So of course, because I liked these books quite a lot, enough to feature them in this video, I don't want to spend much time in telling you how much I love them or how much I enjoyed them. So we'll just give a couple of sentences on why I enjoyed them particularly, but mostly I will focus on presenting them to you and telling you how many in the series and the general plot of the first book. But without further ado, let's go into the video. Sorry, I had to move a bit because I'm fighting with my camera today. I don't know why. Anyway, let's start with maybe a bunch of, it's a series, and it's a series that I have mentioned probably the most of all the series I'm gonna mention, or books I'm gonna mention in this video. And because I've mentioned it before a few times, it makes sense to start it off with that one, and that would be the Hap and Leonard series by Lansdale. This is a crime noir story. There is an adaptation into 2 seasons, I believe, on Amazon Prime, and they're called Hap and Leonard series, and I adored the TV show. I thought it was so well crafted after the novels and actually gave even more life, in more depth to these characters. So if by chance you do want to try the books and you're up for a couple of seasons of very good TV show, crime TV show, sort of crime, you'll see in a second with the plot of the first book what I mean, I would definitely recommend that. Unfortunately, it was not renewed after season 2, and one of the 2 main actors passed away. So it's cancelled basically. Such a true pity though, but we have the books, so we can continue on with the books. Of the 14th that are out at the moment, I've read 8 of them, so I can't testify on the good quality or quality at all of the remaining past book 8, but the first 8 books I really enjoyed. And it was also one of the first noir series I got into, and it made me discover this author, which I need to pick up more by because I just genuinely enjoy his style of writing. But the first book in this series is called Savage Season, and you follow Hap and Leonard. Hap and Leonard, they live in Texas, and Hap is white and straight and Leonard is gay and black, and they are best friends, and they are trying just to live their life. They, I believe, work in a factory at the beginning of these. They're trying to make ends meet, and they live in a place where it's there's not much around. There's not much to do apart from, meeting after work and drink together, and people are still very racist and homophobic, so Leonard is putting up with a lot. And what happens is that the ex of Hap, Trudy, I believe it's her name, Trudy comes back in his life after many years of her having left him. I believe she was actually his ex-wife. She comes back, she has a new boyfriend now, and she has a proposition for Hap and Leonard, and the proposition is to help them with a heist. All they need to do is retrieve some money, and they would get a portion of the of a haste money. And due to money reason, Hap convinces Leonard to kind of go along with the plan, and chaos ensues. The first book is not the strongest, but definitely gives you an idea of his writing style and, you know, the dynamics between the two main characters, which is what I love the most, is Hap and Leonard, this friendship. The second book, Mucho Moyo, I believe it's called, it was my favorite. The second and third book are my favorite in the series, but overall, just reading about these characters going to all of these absurd adventures in the middle of nowhere, these characters really sipped under my skin. Their friendship especially, I think it's a friendship, it's dynamic, the dynamics between those two I could read forever basically, and I really appreciated how he characterized them both together and apart. And yeah, it's just fun, it's fun adventure. It also takes place in an area, in a setting that it's so desolate in a sense, it's so rural, but so unfamiliar to me that I'm also fascinated by the setting. And overall, if you're into if you're into crime, noir stories, I would definitely give it a try. However, if you don't want to, and I'm cheating here, so technically it's 11 books I'm gonna mention today, but if you don't wanna start with a whole series by Lansdale, I have read only one other book, and it was a standalone by Lansdale, and that is Cold in July, which by the way also has a movie out, because I never watched the movie, but this is the cover of the movie. And this standalone novel is about this man. One night he wakes up and there is an intruder in the house, and he has a gun, and so he uses the gun to defend him and his family, and he shoots this man dead. And you then follow the consequences of a choice that done in the spur of a moment, trying to, you know, to scared and to try and save his family and his life. And while the justice system believes that this was a, you know, defense case, so that Richard, our main protagonist, Richard has no guilt, was just defending himself. The father of the man he killed is not convinced that's the case. So again, this is a relatively short novel, and I think it's a good taste. It could give you a good taste of his writing. I really enjoyed this one, and the moral aspect that came with it. I would have wished for this to go into be more length, to go into be more depth, but I think it's still very compelling as a novel, and it tackled the issue that personally I found quite fascinating, the idea of, you know, killing a man in self-defense, what kind of consequences, not only legally but morally and within yourself, that carries. So yeah, I think as standalone, to try out his writing, that would be a good starting point. Now the next one is Up Above, so I'm not gonna bother go up and take it because yeah, everything is gonna come down on my head and I can really do without a head injury today. But it's Demon Road. Now Demon Road is by an author who wrote a very popular middle grade to YA series, and it's the one with the skull. I'm gonna try and put it here if you remember. So he wrote that series, which I never read, but I will eventually maybe one day read it. But Demon Road, I picked up this initially because it was sold as very similar to Supernatural, the TV show, which I adore. And therefore, when I knew that this new trilogy was coming out, I had to try it out for myself. This is YA, and you'll see, I don't recommend many YA anymore these days, so it is a praise for me to recommend these. This was just so bloody fun. This is the story of Amber, normal 16 years old, living her life until one time she comes home and she finds out that she actually is a demon. Her parents are a demon and they've been hiding her, and now she has to go on the run. And I'm gonna keep it very brief and simple. I only want to let you know that there is a sentient car in these. There are killer cars, vampires, and undead serial killers thrown in the mix. Now the first book was just pure entertainment. The series does not hold up that well in book number 2 and 3. However, overall I would still suggest to read them all. But what I really am here to recommend to you for a quick fun, if you love Supernatural, you really don't want to miss this one, is Demon Road. Such an entertaining time. And yeah, I will have to try out the other series by him as well. If you have read the other series by him, because it's quite famous, so if you have read it, would you suggest, even if now I'm an adult, do you think it would still hold up? Let me know. Okay, for the next one, I'm gonna butcher the name of the main protagonist. But I've got Google here and it's gonna help me figure it out. So the next one is The Silence of the Girls. This is maybe kind of a popular title if you want. It's not that unknown, I believe, in the community. It's a mythology retelling. So you're looking at the story of Troy that had been besieged for 10 years. And you look at the story of Troy told from
Briseis
point of view. So she's been captured, as we know, if you know the legend. Briseis, can I call her B? I'm gonna call her B. B, she is captured and given to Achilles as a gift, as a prize, at the beginning of the Troy War, when the Greeks arrives on the shore of Troy. And she lives with them, with the Greeks and with Achilles for 10 years before, you know, the events that then take place for Troy to fall. And so you follow those years from her perspective. And I don't think I have the right vocabulary to express how much I appreciated this story in Inside. Because when I was reading it, I was a bit put off by the fact that B, she's not the most likable character initially. So reading from her perspective, initially I had to adjust a lot. But when I understood what the author was doing and how she was showing us Achilles, you know, Achilles, which is my probably favorite mythological hero, if you want. I was obsessed with the story of Troy, with the movies, with the books, and I always looked at Achilles as this man larger than life, which he technically was in a sense. But here we are told this from a perspective of someone who looks at him and doesn't see the hero, he sees the man, and not a good one at that. And the way this come across and the way this ties up in the end, I just felt so full of emotions. The complexities and the way the author makes you really see things from another perspective that's never considered in, you know, the general media when we talk about Troy and Achilles, was just genuinely brilliant. And I do want to continue on with this trilogy. I believe it's a trilogy. Let me check. Google again. Help me out here. It's a trilogy. So the second book is called The Women of Troy, which I've not read yet. And then The Voyage Home. It's the last one. So you really look at I think she wants to really spin things around and say, okay, this is the story, the same story, but told from the women that had to survive abuse and everything that happened as a consequence of them just being women and in the wrong place at the wrong time. Brilliant. I can't suggest that enough. The next one, I kind of debated if I wanted to put it here or not, but generally I did enjoy this book. It comes with the fact that I do understand that this book is written on a certain perspective. So this is The Lonesome Dove. So The Lonesome Dove, it says here on Goodreads that it's the third book in the Lonesome Dove tetralogy. So it's quite confusing because technically Lonesome Dove is the first book there are like 3 sequels to The Lonesome Dove, but before The Lonesome Dove, written by other authors as well, I believe, there are 27 novels in the same word, like kind of. So it's a very difficult one to understand. I do not know if by chance the author has written prequels in these. So that's to say, maybe research it online, because I'm not doing a good job here in explaining chronologically where Lonesome Dove goes. Okay, I'm aware I've not done enough research, maybe I should have. But it's not the first book in a series, but it can be definitely read as the first book in a series because there are 3 sequels. So I decided to start here and eventually maybe I will continue on. The reason why I never continue on is because this was very intense, lengthy story, and it's an epic Frontiera saga. You follow this bunch of characters. I think you do have mostly a dual perspective, but I could be wrong because it's been years since I've read these. And you follow these men, they have a ranch, and I think they have horses, so they have their own ranch in Texas, when at one point something happens and they need to venture out in the big expanse of America. At the time we are speaking about the time where Indians and Americans were in a constant war, and so there are some very difficult passages in this book. There was a big element of, you know, displaying the atrocities that Indians would do against the settlers, because Indians are portrayed as the enemy in these. So just so you're aware of these, you're aware that there is a lot of violence as well. It's a very graphic, intense book. However, it did really feel epic, if you want, in the scope of it. And because you spend 900 pages with these characters and going through these adventures, and the way it's written, it's so raw, that yeah, I had a big impact on me when I read it. And I do eventually plan to continue on, and I also kind of started to reach out more for that kind of literature after reading that. Said that it's not like I read Far West books all the time, but it's a genre that after reading Lonesome Dove I have picked up, or has been on my radar more, because I enjoyed that quite enough. Still putting in the right context. I have to put this in because I've never spoke about the Lonesome Dove on my channel before, I believe, or not in any depth, and I think it did deserve still a shout out. So the next one is basically one of the very few romantic romance books I will ever mention, just because I generally don't read many, and so I don't have many to recommend. And this is 10 Tiny Breaths, which is part of a companion series by K.A. Tucker, and she's one of the few romance author that I still consider picking up when I read a book, or when I see her name, in a book shop. Not that I do it often nowadays, just because again I don't read those genre, but her romances are the very few that I can say I really enjoyed. So in each of these books you follow a different character that you will meet, majority of them, but you will meet them in book number 1, so in 10 Tiny Breaths. And there is actually a prequel to 10 Tiny Breaths, which is Inner Awake, but I wouldn't suggest to read the Inner Awake before you read 10 Tiny Breaths. And 10 Tiny Breaths is the story of, the protagonist is Casey. So Casey, 4 years prior to the start of the novel, she was involved in a drunk driving accident. So her and her parents were in a car, they were hit by someone who was drunk, and the parents, I believe, passed away. So now Casey and their little sister leave, they need to go and live with their aunt and uncle. However, one day the uncle sleeps in the bed of her little sister, and so Casey decided that it's time for them to go before, the sister gets, is abused by the uncle. So she gets her sister out of there, and they flee to Miami, and Casey's managing, she's managed to find a job and try to, live on the low so no one can find them. And she is clearly having like a lot of traumatic memories and thoughts that she has to deal with, and the last thing she wants to do is fall in love. But there is a very attractive and loving neighbor called Trent, and he seems to have a history of his own, and they kind of connect. And I think these books, the reason why I loved K.A. Tucker is because not only the romantic tension is done very well, it takes its time, it's not like instant love or anything of the sort, but her stories and her characters always have a story behind. There is a bit of more like depth to a certain degree to her romances. In this one especially, was a massive event, like a big traumatic event, and the way she handled the trauma and the way she handles the relationship based on the fact that these characters have been through trauma, and so that the trauma needs to be addressed. It can't just be a subplot just to make things move forward. She really integrates the trauma well. I really enjoyed that. Now it's been maybe 5-7 years since I read a book, this series. My favorite one in this companion series is One Tiny Lie. After One Tiny Lie, which is one of the best romances I've ever read personally, that I really enjoyed. This series I didn't enjoy as much the rest, but they're also mature with sexy time in it, but it's like a very mature romance if you want. They're not like YA, and it doesn't read like a YA for adults, if it makes sense. So I really enjoyed these and all the characters, and I would suggest this as a romance. A quick but absolutely daunting raw read, Long Way Down. This is by Jason Reynolds, but it's illustrated by Chris Priestley, and it's all written in verses. So I read this in probably 2 hours, if at that. And this is about this young boy. He lost his brother due to gang violence, and he decides to go on a path of revenge. And from the back it says, if someone you love gets killed, find the person who killed them and kill them. Don't cry, no snitching, get revenge. I came across this book when I was working with an organization that helps youth involved in violence. So I was working in emergency department at the time. We were working with youth violence and gang violence every day. And I came across these, I don't remember if it was through my own research, I believe, or like a colleague mentioning, I don't know, but I remember that the last sentence, the bloody last chapter, last sentence of this book destroyed me. I think, it was the very last sentence of this book. Had me in tears. Now, I understand that some books, they will impact us differently depending on the context or the moment of our life that we will read them. Of course, because I was so involved at the time within that kind of environment and lifestyle, and I was trying to help, I felt this had like it was a punch in the stomach for me. So my understanding, not maybe everyone will not be so deeply impacted. Said that, I still believe this is a very clever way, very creative way to tell a very deep and important story for so many people, because these resonate with so many people. So many people are involved in gang violence. So many young men are losing their lives left and right, and the kind of dynamics of you do something, then I have to retaliate, and then you have to retaliate, and this cycle it's true, it's real, it's ongoing for so many people out there. So yeah, I adore this novel to the point that I bought 2 copies, and I always thought I'm gonna donate or I'm gonna gift these to someone I believe wants or needs it in the moment. And then I changed job before I had the occasion to do so, but I still have 2 copies of this book, and maybe one day, who knows. Another book that I don't want to risk body harm to take it down. It's On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Now this is a modern classic, and it's a book that has a relatively low rating on Goodreads. I think it's 3.6, but On the Road is one of my favorite modern classic. I was quite young at the time. If you want, I was around 20 years old, and it was my introduction to the Beat generation and the Beat generation literature. I went on then and read other stuff by other Beat generation authors but they didn't come closer to my love for On the Road. I also read the original script where there is no chapter, and it's just this manuscript that you read, and it's not very well polished, it's very raw, and it's autobiographical, right? You read about Jack Kerouac that goes with his friend Neil Cassidy on this trip across North America in order to experience life and get to better know themselves. And it's a mix of descriptions of these roads in the middle of nowhere, and also I remember like the kind of, that profound look at humanity and what it is to be human, and the way Kerouac was able to put on paper his own feelings and emotions as he was experiencing them, and his inner monologue while crossing America. I was just fascinated, and I think his writing particularly clicked with me. And again, I've read other stuff by other authors that didn't work out that much. I have done a video about the most disturbing books I've ever written, and one of the books that was featured in that list was by another Beat generation author. I loathed that book. I'll link down the video if you want. It's an old video, but I still think it's quite funny. So that's to say that I didn't fall in love with Beat generation in general, with everything, but On the Road will always stick with me so much, to the point that I have tattooed on my back one of his sentences. Yeah, it's such a deep impact in me. Reading about a man whose experiences and lifestyle of drinking, smoking, I think drugs as well, I don't remember, but definitely a lot of drinking, is so far away from everything I've experienced, and yet he was able to communicate with me in a sense. We were able, through his manuscript, through his story On the Road, to connect, and I found that experience oddly touching. So yeah, On the Road. Summer, Fireworks, and My Corpse. This is a collection of short stories. There are 3 short stories inside of these, and it's a horror collection of short stories. translated by the Japanese. I will definitely do at some point another recommendation for horror books, so this might feature in that one, just spoiler alert. But I wanted to mention these in this video as well, because I don't think I speak about these enough. I did read at the time 10 Japanese horror books translated in English. I'll link down the video and I kind of reviewed them. This is one of the those that really stuck with me the most, because I don't generally like short stories, and this contains 3 short stories. The first one is Summer, Fireworks and My Corpse, and you follow this 9-year-old girl that gets killed, and you follow then what happens to the killers trying to get away with it from her perspective, so from the dead body perspective. Then there is a story called Yuko, which I don't remember much about, but I think my favorite one was Black Fairy Tale. And Black Fairy Tale is this woman, she gets a transplant for an eye, and now all of a sudden she can see and experience the memories from the previous owner of the eye, and these are very disturbing memories. And I remember some of the atmospheres in the last story. And there is a house, and the way the author was describing things, it creeped the out of me, and I was so creeped out that this book really stuck with me because of that. So believe me, I don't read short stories in general. I don't like them. I don't think they have enough meat to their bones to make an impact, but these ones, just maybe because there are just 3 of them and very lengthy, they did. Definitely worth your time if you especially like horror and like to be creeped out. The last couple, I must say, The Alienist. The Alienist is a historical crime novel. It's a very chunky one. There is an adaptation on Netflix of a TV show which is brilliant, so you can watch that as well. I've been waiting for ages for the second book, which I really enjoyed, but not as much as the first, to come out. And The Alienist is basically the Alienist is how a psychologist was called back in the days. So this novel takes place in 1896. A body of a male prostitute is found and brutally murdered, and the police involves this psychologist, this alienist, to try and figure out the mind of the killer, to try and catch him. And the TV show is so bloody good. The book was also very good. I did read the second book in Italian. No, actually, I read it in English. I do have the second book, but not the first one. I need to purchase it. And the story is just so compelling. It's a very lengthy novel, so it takes its time. There's a lot of characterization, but because I am particularly fascinated by psychologists that, can work with criminals, this was just a gem. And it's also the period that it sets in really sets up the mystery and the atmosphere very well for the story. But if you don't want to do the book, check out the TV show because it was great. And last but not least, for this revival, let me know if you liked those, because I'm gonna do more of those if you like. Definitely I have more than 10 books to recommend that I don't mention enough. I've got plenty of those, but I always feel like either they are the best ever, or they just stay in the middle, or I don't speak about them much, which I do think it's an honest pity, because some other people might actually enjoy them at least as much as me, if not more, who knows. But the last one for today's video is Enchanted. Enchanted is a profoundly disturbing but also touching book. You follow this story told from the perspective of this man on death row, and you don't know his crime, you don't know his name, and he witnesses the story and speaks with his cellmate next to him called York, I believe. York, this next cell to his, he has a set date for his execution, and there is an investigator that comes in and speaks with York to try and put together his crime, what is done, and solve the case, because there are still parts of it that are unsolved for York, not our main protagonist. And then our main protagonist witness York and the investigator trying to come to an end of trying to solve this case, but also York having to deal with the date of its execution coming, and he knows he's gonna die. And then there is a priest in all of these, and so you follow this very small prison dynamic in one of the darkest places you can ever find yourself in, which is death row. And it was told, this story, in such a touching way. The language of this book, it was truly enchanted, because you look at this place, and you follow the protagonist or the protagonists of this story looking for, you know, the story behind the monster, and is there any redemption, is there any peace that you can find in the end. So such deeply profound questions, and the writing was just a thing of beauty. So yeah, The Enchanted is a book that I want to read actually very soon, because I remember that I was just so profoundly touched by a story that I wasn't expecting to be this way when I picked it up. I was expecting something very different, but nevertheless I was so happy with the result, because it really surprised me on all points and really made me stop and think, which is what I usually want from a novel that tackles such important and disturbing topics, if you want. So yeah, guys, that's it for this revival. Again, I would really love to know what you think about it. If you're new, I would love for you to subscribe. What is your revival book? What are the books that you never speak about but actually you would recommend to me if you could, you know, browse through your memory and do recommend books to me. Chat with me in the comments down below. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Ciao.